The smoke alarm shrieked across the pristine summer air of Beaver Creek. The clear blue sky was filled suddenly with billowing, thick black smoke rolling up from Pine Ridge Resort. My cabin retreat I'd spent my lifetime creating. Olivia's distressed voice ringing in my phone. "Russell, your cabins, oh my God." The fire spreading so quickly, I put down my coffee mug in a hurry outside. Even from a distance, I could see the savage flames devouring my grandfather's final legacy. Cabin, meanwhile, from the corner of the parking lot, a gaudy purple SUV slowly rolled away. I immediately recognized Brenda Wilson's car, the woman whose land purchase offer I had firmly rejected with a decisive no just yesterday. Where are you watching this video from? Drop a comment below and come back to find out how I made her pay for what she did. I took over Pine Ridge Resort from my grandfather 3 years ago. It was not much back then, just 5 simple cabins hugged up against the pines with beautiful views of Beaver Lake. Under my management, it had increased to 12 luxury cabins, each one lovingly designed to make my grandfather proud, while providing modern amenities that drew visitors from all 3 states. The resort was situated just beyond the gates of Riverside Estates, an upscale community ruled by their rambunctious homeowners association. I had heard rumors about their president, Brenda Wilson, but nothing could have prepared me for our initial encounter. It was a picture-perfect Tuesday morning when her purple SUV cruised into my gravel parking lot, kicking up dust that clearly offended her at once. Brenda emerged in a getup that was only best described as a crime against fashion, a fluorescent floral frock with orange heels, and costume jewelry that clinked with every over-the-top gesture. Behind her trailed Theodore Clark, her loyal vice president, grasping a tablet and gazing uneasy in the heat. "Mr. Thompson?" she greeted with a smile that didn't come close to touching her eyes. "I've been meaning to make contact. I'm Brenda Wilson, president of the Riverside Estates Homeowners Association." Her handshake was flaccid, her palm damp in the summer heat, but her eyes were assessing as she looked over my property. "What a charming little business you have here," she said, the condescension dripping from her tone more apparent than the sweat pounding against Theodore's brow. More than iced tea at the resort's open-air cafe. Brenda outlined her proposal. The HOA wanted to buy my property for double its market value to construct what she termed a community recreation center. I would have thought about it if I hadn't seen blueprints dropping from Theodore's file, squarely indicating plans for a private mansion. Not a community center. I value the offer, I asserted, but Pine Ridge isn't on the market. My grandfather built this house cabin by cabin. I promised him I'd maintain it in the family. Brenda's smile tightened her jewelry, jingling as she leaned forward. "Mr. Thompson, Russell, maybe you don't realize Riverside Estates bought the entire block around you. You're now a Gibraltar in our backyard. It would be best for all if you sold to us willingly." When I didn't budge, her act crumbled. "You'll come to regret this move," she told, standing up suddenly. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Once they were gone, I found my reservations beginning to fall off US to cancel on the basis of cryptic warnings regarding safety issues at Pine Ridge. That same afternoon, I got an email from boss William Prescott at Oakwood County Investment Fund. "Russell, we must review a critical new project. The board has tasked you to examine the finances of some of the area's local HOAs prior to US sanctioning their next funding cycle. The attached files contained extensive financial documents for 3 homeowners associations, including Riverside Estates." As I paged through the documents, discrepancies leaped out at me. Brenda had been embezzling funds over $200,000 worth of fake landscaping improvements that never happened. The irony was not lost on me. As the senior financial advisor to Oakwood County Investment Fund, I would be making the decision to approve Riverside Estates' budget for the next 3 years. I decided to remain anonymous secret while going deeper. The very next morning, I came across unauthorized danger does not comply with safety standards. Signs posted illegally on Pine Ridge entrance. Guests drove up, noticed the warnings, and turned around before I could clarify. As I removed the signs, I felt a cold resolve settling in. This was no longer just about my property. This was about revealing corruption. I looked at my grandfather's photo on my desk, us standing together as we constructed the first cabin, and made a silent vow I would strike back. But prudently, Little did I realize how speedily this war would escalate, or how far Brenda Wilson would stretch in order to acquire what she desired. Brenda's harassment campaign became more brutal with ruthless effectiveness. Each day brought new desecrations in my mailbox, forged HOA notices with charges of $100 to $500 for overgrown tree height, unapproved colors for painting in unauthorized buildings. The sheer number was staggering at times, 3 or 4 notices a day, each more absurd than the previous one, cited me for incorrect mailbox height, although my property employs the use of a post office box. Another requested outright removal of non-nabage plant species that had been thriving on the land since Riverside Estates was not even a twinkle in somebody's eye. The most ridiculous infraction, my cabin facades were an unauthorized color of brown. Apparently, the natural cedar wood my grandfather had installed specifically for its harmonious blending with the surrounding woods was objectionable to Brenda's visual sensibilities. I spent hours digging up HOA rules and county maps of property, verifying what I already had a hunch about. Pine Ridge Resort rested squarely outside Riverside Estates jurisdiction, with official boundary maps and property deeds in hand. I felt I had to confront Brenda in person at the HOA office. The Riverside Estates HOA offices were housed in a pretentious colonial-style structure with absurd white columns that seemed to sneer at all my grandfather represented. In the air conditioning blasted cold enough to freeze meat, Brenda presided behind a huge mahogany desk. Her attire today was quite agony, a garish floral blouse with bright orange pants, which made her resemble a garden that went wrong. The tawdry gold Bengal bracelets on her wrists jingled noisily as she shuffled through papers, feigning busy when I arrived. "Mr. Thompson," she exclaimed in mock surprise, "what can we do for you today? Have you changed your mind about our favorable offer?" I laid my papers on her desk, silently enjoying the way her smile shook. "These official maps of the county clearly indicate that Pine Ridge Resort is outside of your HOA jurisdiction. Your warnings and penalties have no validity, and I demand you cease to harass my business right away." Her face changed from insincere friendliness to bare hostility, quicker than a summer thunderstorm blowing in. "These maps are surely out of date," she snapped, hardly looking at them. "Riverside Estates is growing. Our board has voted already to include your eyesore within our boundaries." The standoff got intense fast as other HOA members congregated to see. Theodore fumbled papers anxiously as Brenda's voice increased in intensity. "The community has standards, Mr. Thompson. Your dilapidated cabins are hurting property values throughout Beaver Creek." When I peacefully reminded her that my resort was established 30 years before her development and had received 3 regional tourism awards, her face turned red to an alarming purple hue that she normally drives. "I will redefine the HOA boundaries and make you conform to our rules," she shouted, spittle on her lips. "We know how to handle people like you." The rest of the board members looked at each other uncomfortably as Brenda's tantrum raged on. A middle-aged woman in the back actually rolled her eyes, quickly looking away when Brenda caught her eye. Finally, Brenda demanded me out, threatening vague but ominous, stronger measures if I didn't get a hold of myself and sell walking through the sizzling parking lot. Afterwards, my phone rang with text messages from unfamiliar numbers. Shoplifting at high-end members. Secretly offering support. "She's done this for years," one wrote. "Forced out the Hendersons last summer with bogus violations until they sold at half price." Another message warned, "Be careful. When Brenda doesn't get her way, she plays dirty." I soon discovered how dirty when I stopped at Beaver Creek Supermarket for groceries. Returning to my SUV, I found "Redneck Go Away" spray painted across the driver's side and bright red letters visible from 50 yards away. An elderly couple walking past shook their heads sympathetically, but rushed off when I glanced at them. Everyone was scared to stand up to Brenda. The store manager apologetically took me to look at security footage, which had mysteriously broken down during the very time period of the vandalism, though a purple SUV could be seen driving away from the parking lot. That night, Olivia Bennett, my neighbor, and the sole Riverside citizen openly to hold on as friends with me, visited with shocking news. "Russell, I was at the emergency HOA meeting tonight." She told me, her normally bright face etched with concern. "Brenda declared war on you. She literally said she would make that Russell person cry and begged to sell for any price. They're up to something big. I invited Olivia onto the cabin porch, pouring us both big glasses of bourbon as the sunset-colored Beaver Lake in golds and purples. I've been studying their financial statements in my work. I confided, revealing to her some of the suspicious activity that I'd identified. Brenda's been embezzling funds from the HOA for years, bogus consulting fees, ghost landscaping jobs, inflated security services that never happened. Olivia's eyes widened. That explains why constantly our dues keep going up, while amenities continue to dwindle. Last year's pool renovation that never occurred cost every family an additional $300. She slouched forward, speaking softly even though we were alone. Russell, beware, Brenda knows people everywhere around town, the bank, the county clerk's office, even a person in the sheriff's department. She is a threat when trapped. As Olivia departed, I sat by myself on the porch, observing fireflies appear about the cabins my grandfather had constructed with his own two hands. The gravity of what I was attempting to do fell upon me highly on my shoulders. I held the authority to freeze Riverside's funding, revealing Brenda's corruptness. But this would mean revealing my role at Oakwood County Investment Fund and risk inflaming this battle beyond containment. Even so, with each new day and each renewed tactic of harassment, Brenda was leaving me little option. Gazing out at the darkening lake, I made my choice. I would compile irrefutable proof before making my move. What I didn't realize at the time was how little time I had before Brenda would take this dispute to unimaginable heights. Brenda's next assault appeared at dawn. I woke up to find Pine Ridge surrounded by official-sounding environmental hazard restricted area signs. Overnight, the HOA had barricaded all access roads with construction machinery, supposedly performing emergency repairs. The backhoes and cement trucks created an impassable barrier carefully located where public roads met my property. Guests couldn't come to us, delivery trucks were sent away, and even the postal carrier was informed the place was not safe. When I attempted to talk to the construction foreman, he just shrugged and produced permits, obviously pushed through approval due to Brenda's friends at the county office. "Just following orders, pal," he grumbled, not looking at me. Roadwork planned for 2 weeks, phone calls poured in to cancel bookings as prospective visitors uncovered deceptively fake warnings when they searched for pinnerage on the internet. Someone had posted fictitious reviews stating that visitors had encountered hazardous conditions and health code infractions at my resort. My once booming resort was a ghost town in days. The economic blow came at once and was disastrous. Without revenue, I found it difficult to pay my small crew, many of whom did so begrudgingly after giving notice, unable to survive this fabricated crisis. As I delved into the HOA's accounts, further suspicious trends were revealed. Riverside Estates had paid more than $70,000 to a dummy company called Elite Security, consulting a company that did not appear to exist aside from a post office box. Another $30,000 had gone to Premier Landscape Design for work never done. Both businesses went back to accounts linked to Brenda, though knowingly hidden behind family members' name. Perhaps most disturbing was a recent transfer of $15,000 to an outfit specialized demolition services, with a cryptic entry in the ledger merely stating PR cleanup. I recorded everything, systematically constructing a case that would ultimately bring her down. But Brenda wasn't done with her escalation. On Wednesday afternoon, while I was scanning the resort's vacant reservation list, my phone called with a number I did not recognize. "Is this Russell Thompson?" a hesitant female voice asked. When I answered, she went on, speaking in a rush as though she was in fear of being overheard. "This is Haley Wilson, Brenda's daughter. We have to meet somewhere discreet. There are something you need to know." We had agreed to meet at Beaver Creek Shop away from Riverside Estates. Haley came 30 minutes late, nervously looking around the cafe before scooting into the booth across from me. Despite being Brenda's daughter, she was her opposite in every sense. Modest dress, minimal makeup, and a sincere demeanor that her mother entirely lacked. She drummed on her cup, obviously uneasy but resolute. "My mother isn't constructing a community center," she exclaimed, shoving a folder across the table. "These are the actual plans I discovered on her computer. She needs your land for her own compound, a mansion with private lake frontage. The HOA money is funding it, but the land will be in her name." I flipped through blueprints revealing an ostentatious home where my cabin was located. Why are you telling me this, Haley? She glanced down, folding her napkin, because she's done this before. 3 other properties and she destroyed those people's lives. I can't let it happen again. Later that day, I spotted Brenda and Theodore trespassing on my property, taking measurements and snapping photos of the cabins in the daylight as if they owned them already. They had somehow trod past the very roadblocks they'd had put in place coming onto my property by way of a service path I'd ever even been aware of. "This is private property," I shouted, coming up to them across the sun-baked lawn. "You have to depart at once." Brenda's tawdry jewelry flashed as she turned, her face twisting into naked contempt. "Your time here is counted, Thompson. Intelligent people recognize when they're beaten." When I didn't back down, she advanced on me, her perfume suffocating in the heat of the summer. "You have no idea what I'm capable of," she snarled, then knowingly threw her water bottle in my face. I stood immobile, water running down my shirt, conscious that Theodore was recording. I noticed he hesitantly began recording only when Brenda walked toward me, conveniently omitting her trespass and provocation. Sure enough, edited video surfaced on social media later that evening, showing me as aggressive resort owner menacing an innocent woman. The video had been cropped to depict only my furious face after being spat at with water, making it seem unprovoked. Comments full of outrage from individuals who were unaware of the circumstances. My reputation in a town that I had come to adore was being systematically destroyed. Deputy Franklin Morrison was not among the few officials Brenda's influence had hold over. When I presented him with the unedited security video, the altercation, he shook his head in disgust. "This isn't the first complaint against Brenda Wilson I've had," he admitted, "but she's careful to remain just within the law. The trespassing is a best-case civil issue." He mapped out the roadblocks around my property, frowning. "These construction permits are technically valid, although hurried through approval without real review. Someone in the county office is clearly assisting her." He told me to document every event and seek a restraining order, although we both understood local judges might be afraid to act against someone with Brenda's connections. As I was departing the sheriff's office, my phone flashed with a panicked text from Olivia. "Just overheard from my property cameras exposing the truth of Brenda and Theodore discussing cleaning out your cabins tonight. They're going to do something. Be careful." My stomach twisted with fear as I attempted to call Deputy Morrison, but he had already taken off on an emergency call. Driving back to Pine Ridge, I discovered the main road mysteriously under repair, again requiring a 40-minute side trip. By the time I approached my land, I could already see smoke billowing against the sky in the afternoon, and Olivia's frantic call only confirmed my worst fears. "Russell? Oh my God, they're burning your cabins. I just spotted Brenda and Theodore making their escape." The fire department was too late. By evening, Pine Ridge Resort was nothing more than smoldering ash and blackened wood frames extending like bony fingers toward the darkening heavens. I stood aghast in silence as firefighters fought the final flames, the acrid sting of smoke searing my nostrils and eyes. All my grandfather had created, all I had built and maintained, brought to ash in one afternoon. The fire chief stepped forward, his face grim under his helmet. "Definitely arson," he confirmed quietly. "Multiple ignition points accelerant used. We'll conduct a full investigation," but he trailed off both of us, knowing that in Beaver Creek, Brenda's influence might well smother the investigation before it began. I nodded mechanically, thanked him, and wandered through the ruins of my life's work. The next morning brought another blow. My bank accounts, both personal and business, had been put on ice because of suspected fraud. The branch manager, a friend of Brenda's, enlightened me with candid insincerity that numerous serious complaints had been lodged against me. She pushed a formal letter along her desk with a barely perceptible smirk, her eyes never actually meeting mine. The letter held general accusations of financial irregularities without particular details or proof. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Clearly Brenda's latest attack. Without access to funds, I couldn't pay contractors to clear the debris, couldn't compensate my remaining staff, couldn't even afford a hotel room. Olivia offered her guest room, but I declined, not wanting to make her a target of Brenda's vengeance. Instead, I slept in my truck parked along the boundary of my burned-out property, observing during sleepless nights as coyotes sorted through the remains of my past life. 3 days after the fire, a real estate agent came to my doorstep with an envelope with Brenda's new offer 50% below market price for the now devastated land with a 48-hour acceptance deadline. The note appended said merely, "Be reasonable, you have no choice." For an instant, despair nearly engulfed me. Maybe she had been correct with no cabin, no income, frozen funds, and a sullied reputation. What was I fighting for anymore? That afternoon, parked in my truck, with the air conditioning blowing to beat back the relentless heat of summer, I seriously weighed taking her offer just to get out of the nightmare my life had turned into. My phone rang showing William Prescott's number. With reluctance, I answered, anticipating being let go from my job at Oakwood County Investment Fund because of the rumors circulating around town. Instead, William's voice sounded worried. "Russell, I need you in my office immediately. These financial discrepancies you noted in the HOA reports, they're worse than we anticipated. And now I'm being told there was a fire at your property." I met with him, making the first stop at what was left of my main cabin. Standing in the rubble, I saw a shattered picture frame with a photo of my grandfather and me. In lifting it up, the heat-distorted frame crumbled, cutting my hand. Blood fell on the ash-covered earth as I gazed at the broken photo, a perfect symbol for everything that was lost, sitting atop a charred beam that used to hold up the main lodge ceiling. I finally gave in to tears. Tears and blood and ash mingled as I struck the destroyed wood with my fist. Anger and desperation overwhelming me after days of stoic endurance. When I was finally able to collect myself enough to examine the photograph again, I noticed something in the background that I'd never noticed before. My grandfather standing proudly alongside a historical marker, brushing ash from the photo. I could just barely make out text stating that Pine Ridge had been a stopping point on the Lewis, Lewis and Clark expedition. If proven, this would make the land eligible for historical protection that would render it immune to forced sale or assimilation into Riverside Estates. It was the first time in days that I had a glimmer of hope. My phone rang again. Haley Wilson, her voice frantic and hard to hear. "Russell, Mom hired some thugs. They're going to set fire to what's left of your main cabin tonight. She believes it's the only way to make you sell." I immediately called Deputy Morrison, but without Haley agreeing to make an official statement, he could only offer to drive by the property later. Not enough to stop another attack. Rushing back toward Pine Ridge, I found the access road blocked yet again by emergency utility work. Another HOA tactic to keep me from my property. Forced to park and proceed on foot through the woods, I was still a quarter mile away when Olivia's call came through. "Russell, they've done it again. The main cabin structure is completely engulfed." I catch Brenda's car speeding away from the scene. By the time I arrived at the clearing, all that was left of my grandfather's original cabin was flickering flames in the fading light of the evening sky. As I watched my last link to him burn to ashes, something inside me hardened. I had hit rock bottom, which meant there was only one direction to head. Brenda Wilson had stolen everything tangible from me, but in the process she'd released me from any constraint or inhibition. It was time to employ every asset, every contact, every shred of evidence I'd accumulated. It was time to fight back, retry. Claude can err. Please double-check T responses. The morning after the second fire, I went to William Prescott's office at Oakwood County Investment Fund, resembling a man who'd lost everything because I had. My clothes were wrinkled from sleeping in my truck, my hand bandaged from the cut dark circles under my eyes from days without proper rest. William, an elegant man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and piercing eyes that noticed everything, listened without pause as I outlined the whole saga from Brenda's initial approach to the horrible fires. When I was done, I slid across his desk a thumb drive, holding all the evidence I'd compiled. Financial irregularities, falsified HOA documents, witness accounts and security tapes. I should have gotten to you earlier. I conceded, but I wanted proof beyond doubt before accusing someone as well connected as Brenda Wilson. William read through the files with growing concern, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Finally, he closed his laptop and fixed me with a penetrating stare. "Russell, as your superior, I should reprimand you for not immediately disclosing your conflict of interest regarding Riverside Estates." My heart sank, anticipating dismissal on top of everything else I'd lost. Instead, he continued. However, as someone who's witnessed your integrity over 5 years of employment, I'm authorizing you to perform a wide-ranging forensic audit of Riverside Estates' HOA. Immediately, you'll have unfettered access to our investigative tools, and I'm freezing their funding until review. The first time in days I had the weight off my shoulders. So thank you, sir. But there's something else you should know. Brenda Wilson is the person who burned down my resort, I'm sure of it. But I don't possess concrete evidence that could hold up in court. William's face set hard. Then we'll discover it. Arson is a federal crime when commercial property is involved. I'm calling our lawyer in the state fire marshal's office. He reached for his phone, then hesitated. Russell, you look awful. Go home, or in other words, go to a hotel. We'll pay for it. Rest up, tidy up, and return tomorrow ready to go. We'll need you on top of your game for what's ahead. I wanted to protest, to plunge right into the investigation, but fatigue was fogging my brain. Nodding in appreciation, I checked into Beaver Creek Inn, bathed for the first time in days, and fell apart into dreamless sleep. The following morning, feeling a little human, once more I went to the monthly Riverside Estates HOA meeting as Olivia's guest. Brenda sat in her temporary throne, resplendent, in a bright floral print dress that was in poor taste for the serious business being conducted. Her smile wavered for an instant when she saw me in the back of the room, but she regained her composure, addressing the gathered homeowners with confident authority. As you've all seen, we've started initial work on our new community recreation center, she announced, holding up the renderings that bore little resemblance to the private mansion blueprints Haley had revealed to me. Due to some benevolent shifts in the local property market, we'll be adding on to the old Pine Ridge Resort property. The smug gratification in her tone when she spoke of my ruined property enraged me, but I kept a objective statement, noting each word. Less than an hour later, Brenda received formal notice from Oakwood County Investment Fund. Riverside Estates funding was being withheld pending investigation of financial irregularities. Her frantic phone calls to the fund were ignored or led her to the legal department. By afternoon, she had called a surprise HOA meeting, blaming Theodore for accounting oversights and assuring residents the freeze was a minor technical issue. Theodore finally pushed too far, broke ranks. This isn't about paperwork mistakes, he interrupted, his voice shaking. This is about hundreds of thousands of dollars missing from our accounts. Money that went to shell companies you control? Brenda, the room erupted in shocked outrage as Theodore continued revealing details of Brenda's schemes, including the deliberate harassment of neighboring property owners to cause forced sales at low prices. Back at Oakwood County Investment Fund, William and I collaborated with forensic accountants to track down every missing dollar. The proof was incriminating, not only embezzlement, but tax fraud, filing false reports and misappropriation of federal housing funds. In the meantime, Deputy Morrison had procured search warrants on Brenda's personal and HOA electronic equipment on the basis of the financial records we'd presented. We found something you ought to see, he said, showing me restored text messages between Brenda and the men whom she'd hired to burn down the structures. This is sufficient for arrest warrants on arson and conspiracy charges. For the first time since I'd seen my cabins burned, I had a sense of justice on the horizon. Word of Brenda's oncoming legal issues spread rapidly throughout Beaver Creek. Haley phoned me to testify regarding her mother's activities. I discovered further evidence, she told me when we sat at a quiet corner table in Beaver Creek coffee shop. Mom attempted to erase all off her computer, but I've been making backup copies of her files for months, including audio recordings of her strategizing the fires with Theodore. Her hands shook as she handed me another thumb drive. I should have spoken up earlier, but I was afraid she's still my mom after everything. I clasped her hand for an instant, shocked by her bravery. You're doing the right thing, Haley. It took true strength. That night when I returned to my hotel room, I saw Brenda Wilson waiting in the parking lot next to her purple SUV. The imperious HOA president was gone. This woman seemed desperate. Her makeup smudged, her tawdry outfit creased. We need to talk, Thompson, she shouted, trying to sound authoritative, but managing only a trembling request. This absurd investigation, I know you're responsible. Name your price to make it disappear. I gazed at her with quiet disdain, taking down the conversation on my phone. "There's no price, Brenda. You torched my family's heritage. You burgled your neighbors. Justice is not for sale." Her face twisted into anger. All pretense dropped. "You'll live to regret this. I still have friends in this town. By the lawyers finish with you, you'll regret not accepting my offer." As she stormed off, I smiled for the first time in weeks. Brenda still didn't get it. She'd already stolen from me everything that mattered. All that was left was my integrity and commitment to justice being served, and those she could never reach. The meeting room of Beaver Creek Town Hall had never been so crowded. Every seat was occupied by people standing up against the walls and flowing into the hallway, all convened for Riverside Estates HOA's special hearing on its financial practices. At the front, a panel of county officials and money regulators sat behind a long table, poring over documents and whispering back and forth. Brenda Wilson sat with her hastily retained attorney, still somehow exuding an air of outraged righteousness. Notwithstanding the circumstances, she'd opted for another brazen attire, this one more garish than normal, as if the bold designs might take attention away from the serious charges made against her. Theodore Clark sat a few seats down, refusing to make eye contact with her glaring stares. His own lawyer leaning in and whispering counsel in his ear. William Prescott began the proceedings with a grave introduction. "Oakwood County Investment Fund has found serious financial irregularities in Riverside Estates. Homeowners Association's accounts. We've asked everyone involved to submit evidence before making our ultimate ruling on funding in the future." He nodded to his companion at the end of the table, our senior finance advisor. I stood up and walked to the podium, Brenda's confusion giving way to shock when she realized I was in my professional guise. "My name is Russell Thompson, senior finance advisor to Oakwood County Investment Fund." I started speaking, my voice firm in the face of the emotion simmering just below the surface. "For the last month, I've performed a full audit of Riverside Estates HOA's books revealing systemic fraud of more than $400,000 in embezzled funds." Brenda sprang up, her jewelry clanking wildly. "This is a conflict of interest. Thompson has property abutting Riverside Estates. He has a grudge against me." Her lawyer attempted to hold her back, but Brenda was out of control, her meticulously built disguise collapsing under duress. The chair of the panel requested order and then spoke directly to her concerns. Mr. Wilson were cognizant of Mr. Thompson's land ownership, who are also cognizant that his holiday resort was recently torched in arson attacks that are being investigated separately. However, the financial evidence speaks for itself, no matter who found it. He waved for me to go on, and I showed slide after slide of incriminating evidence. Fake invoices, ghost contractors, unauthorized cash, withdrawals, all pointing back to accounts held by Brenda or her relative. As the financial presentation ended, Deputy Morrison came forward with some extra evidence. "The Beaver Creek Sheriff's Department has been investigating the arson at Pine Ridge Resort," he announced, showing pictures of the aftermath of the fires. Surety video taken on adjacent properties showed individuals coming and going from the resort moments before the fires were reported. The screen at his back displayed fuzzy but identifiable photos of Brenda's purple sport utility vehicle parked close to my property entrance, with Theodore easily visible in the front seat. Brenda's outrage turned immediately to denial. "That proves nothing. I drive by that property every day. And even if I happened to be there, Theodore made all the arrangements." Theodore's head flew back in shock, betrayal and rage crossing his face at having the shaft thrown under him. His attorney spoke urgently in his ear, and Theodore nodded and stood to speak to the panel. "I'd like to provide further evidence," he added, voice trembling slightly as he put a small recorder on the table. "This is a discussion between Brenda Wilson and myself recorded yesterday before the first fire at Pine Ridge Resort." He touched play and Brenda's recognizable voice filled the room, which had suddenly fallen silent. "I don't care how you deal with it. Theodore, I want those cabins gone, burned to ashes if need be. Make it appear as an accident. Once Thompson has lost everything, he'll sell for any price I bid." Gasps and murmurs passed through the crowd as Brenda's lawyer desperately attempted to object to the tape. The panel chair overruled him, observing that Tennessee was a one-party consent state on recordings. Brenda, face pale under her makeup, grabbed for the recorder, but was held back by a deputy. That moment had come for my third revelation. There's one final piece of evidence, I said softly, inserting a flash drive into the computer. Following Deputy Morrison's suggestion after the first harassment started, I installed hidden cameras in my primary cabin. The monitor showed crystal clear film dated the day of the second arson, displaying Brenda actually instructing two men where to dump accelerant around my grandfather's original cabin. Her voice was clearly audible. "Burn it all down. Don't leave anything standing. I want Thompson on his knees begging to sell." The room exploded in stunned cries. Brenda's lawyer slumped in defeat, and she herself appeared to fold inward, her artificially bolstered confidence gone in a flash. The panel chair asked for a 15-minute recess to consult. When they returned, their ruling was unanimous. Riverside Estates' HOA funding is irrevocably withdrawn. All financial records are to be handed over to the Office of the District Attorney for criminal prosecution. The HOA charter is suspended pending reorganization under new leadership. He nodded to Deputy Morrison, who came up to Brenda with handcuffs. "Brenda Wilson, you're under arrest for embezzlement, conspiracy, and arson." As she was being taken away, still protesting innocence and threatening lawsuits, her eyes flashed with mine in sheer hatred. I felt no pleasure, only a sick relief that justice was being done at last. Outside the town hall, reporters assembled for comments. William patted me on the back reassuringly as cameras flashed about us. Oakwood County Investment Fund will be coordinating with residents of Riverside Estates to create a transparent, accountable new HOA framework, he declared. And we're building a recovery fund for businesses impacted by illegalities of the last administration, beginning with Pine Ridge Resort. As the crowd broke up, Haley approached nervously, tears running down her face. "I'm sorry about everything my mom did," she whispered. "She wasn't always like this." After my dad left, I nodded in understanding. "None of this is your fault, Haley. You showed real courage coming forward." She managed to smile tremulously before being escorted away by her aunt, who'd arrived to take custody while Brenda waited for trial. Later that night, I went back to the charred remains of Pine Ridge standing there, watching the sunset color in the destruction in ironically beautiful oranges and golds. The material loss still, though, overwhelmed decades of history destroyed in ash. Yet something inside me had changed beyond meager wreckage. I could almost imagine my grandfather approvingly nodding at how I'd held my ground. Brenda had stolen my cabins, but in her blind avarice, she'd left behind something fundamental. She'd never bothered to dig deeper and find out who I was beyond a resort owner getting in her way. That blunder had been her ultimate ruin and the first move toward rebuilding what she'd attempted to destroy 6 months following the arrest of Brenda Wilson. Beaver Creek saw the hottest spring in years. Flowering trees bloomed weeks ahead of schedule, sprinkling the landscape with bursts of white and pink blossoms. Standing on the newly restored deck of Pine Ridge Resort's main lodge, I inhaled deeply of the newly cut pine and sawdust that filled the air, the scent of new beginnings and do-overs. Construction workers scurried across the property, restoring cabins with new materials while maintaining my grandfather's original plans. Where 12 cabins had previously existed, plans for 20 luxury units were being formulated along with a community nature center dedicated in honor of my grandfather. The change wasn't merely physical. The overall mood of Beaver Creek had shifted since Brenda's ouster from office. The criminal trial progressed with unexpected speed, helped along by Theodore's agreement to fully cooperate in return for a lightened sentence. In a sunlight-filled courtroom filled with Riverside Estates residents, Brenda refused to concede until the last verdict was read. Guilty on all charges, 5 years in federal prison and restitution of more than $700,000 to the HOA, and further damages to me personally for the destruction of Pine Ridge. As the bailiff escorted her away, Brenda's once imperious demeanor had completely collapsed. The gaudy clothes and sparkly jewelry were gone and replaced by a plain pantsuit, her face empty with the shock of consequences at last overtaking her behavior. Our eyes met and parted as she walked by. In hers I saw no remorse but bitter resentment at having to be held accountable, perhaps for the first time in her life. The insurance settlement only met part of my loss, but the payoff from Brenda's confiscated assets and a small business recovery grant from Oakwood County gave me enough capital to envision Pine Ridge greater than it was before. William had fulfilled his vow of assistance, not just approving my development loan, but granting me a promotion within the investment fund, a position that enabled me to assist other small businesses in distressed predatory practices. Most rewarding was the historic designation we achieved for the property. After confirming its relation to the Lewis Weiss and Clark expedition, a modest bronze plaque now occupied space where my grandfather's original cabin had once stood, guaranteeing the land would be kept safe from development no matter who owned bordering parcels. What I never anticipated was the way the community would support Pine Ridge's rebirth. Former Riverside Estates residents, who were relieved from Brenda's dictatorial regime, offered weekends to assist in rebuilding. Local companies contributed materials and services. Even Theodore, serving community service as part of a plea deal, spent hours helping restore the landscaping. His organizational skills coming in handy in coordinating volunteer efforts. "I should have stood up to her years ago," he admitted one afternoon as we planted native wildflowers along the new hiking path. "I realized what she was doing was wrong, but it was simpler to comply than to struggle. Haley's weakness was something I knew better than anyone else. Until I was pushed to my very breaking point, I too had almost given up. Instead of struggling on, Haley Wilson came by on occasion, always bearing homemade cookies or little considerate presents for the construction team. Having her aunt in Nashville was providing her with a new beginning. She required, aside from the shadow of her mother, she'd received an acceptance to Vanderbilt University on a partial scholarship, and I discreetly arranged for Pine Ridge to fund the balance of her education through a community foundation we'd set up. "You didn't have to do that," she said when she learned emotion, causing her voice to shake. "After what my mother did to you," I cut her off kindly. "We don't inherit our parents' guilt. Haley, you made your own decisions when it counted most. That scholarship is because of who you are, not who she was." On opening weekend in late April, Pine Ridge Resort welcomed its first visitors since the fires. The new cabins shone in the spring sunlight, each one titled after Tennessee native trees, with my grandfather's rebuilt original cabin converted into a museum, honoring the history of the property as the centerpiece. Olivia, who had become my business partner after giving key testimony against Brenda, managed check-ins while I conducted tours for area dignitaries and prep. The makeover from ashes to thriving resort in 6 months appeared near miraculous, a testament to what determination and community support could achieve. As the celebration spilled into night, Haley came up to me with a small soot-stained metal box. "We discovered this buried under where your grandfather's cabin used to be," she explained, setting it down gently in my possession. The fire investigation unit overlooked it. Stored inside was a group of my grandfather's personal belongings that had managed to survive the fire. His pocket watch, a number of photos, and a letter to me, penned years earlier than his passing. With shaking hands, I opened up the yellowing paper. Russell had started in his familiar script. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're to undergo some tests that tried your mettle. Remember what I always said to you. You never really lose what counts the most. Material things burn, rust, or burn out. Character, integrity, determination, these are fireproof. Whatever brought you to this letter is known to you, that I had belief in you from the moment you were born. Create something lasting, son." That night, after the guests had withdrawn to cabins and employees had departed home, I sat by myself out on the main lodge deck, observing moonlight disturb Beaver Lake. From my position, I could view the new Riverside Community Association building, where Brenda's dictatorial HOA previously reigned. The homeowners had voted for an entirely open governance system with term limits and public financial audits, lessons learned the hard way during Brenda's rule. In the other direction, the county courthouse, where she currently sat in a holding cell to await transfer to federal prison, her empire of intimidation came crashing down entirely. I felt no pleasure in her defeat, only a subtle satisfaction that justice had won out and that her ability to hurt others had been taken away forever. A shooting star blazed across the night sky, and I made a silent wish, not for prosperity or achievement, but for the wisdom to use this second chance. Well, my grandfather had created Pineridge as a home where people could meet nature and one another. Brenda had viewed it only as land to be purchased in ignorance of its significance and past, in attempting to eradicate what meant most to me. She had inadvertently opened the door for something much greater to take its place. The new Pine Ridge would not just be fulfilling my grandfather's dream, but extending it a haven where individuals could find solace. A nature center, teaching guests about conservation, a community ally, and not a standalone company. Out of the literal flames of ruin, something greater had emerged, showing that at times when someone torches what you spent years creating, because you had the courage to say no, the world provides surprising means to rebuild better than ever. At HOA Vibes, we don't merely tell tales, we allow the mess to speak for itself. If this one blew your mind, wait until you see what's coming next. HOA Vibes signing off for now. But the drama? Oh, it never sleeps. Tap that bell if you're ready for round 2. Still thinking about what just went down? Yeah, us too. Hit subscribe and come unravel more madness with HOA Vibes. Thanks for riding the emotional roller coaster with HOA Vibes. Buckle up, the next one's even twistier. HOA Vibes, where reality feels like fiction, and fiction wishes it was this juicy hit that like before the next bombshell is dropped. Another wild story courtesy of HOA Vibes. If your jaw's on the floor, you're in the right place. Subscribe and stay shocked. This story might be over, but HOA Vibes has a whole vault of mayhem waiting. Choose your next rabbit hole wisely. HOA Vibes, where neighbors feud, secret spill, and karma always clocks in. Stick around, we've got receipts. You watched it, you felt it. Now share it with someone who loves drama even more than you. That's the HOA Vibes way. From the whispers to the wreckage. HOA Vibes brings it all.